Tahoe stood on the command deck of the UEN Horizon, watching the stars through the massive viewport. His dark uniform fit perfectly against his tall frame, the silver insignia of Earth's 7th Expeditionary Force gleaming under the ship's lights. Behind him, officers worked quietly at their stations, preparing for humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Concord. "Admiral, we're approaching the coordinates," reported Lieutenant Dongman, his fingers dancing across the navigation console. "Transition to normal space in 30 seconds. Tahoe nodded, his expression calm despite the weight of responsibility. Humanity's future among the stars would be shaped by what happened today. The fleet behind them, 37 vessels representing Earth and her colonies, was far more powerful than what they had disclosed to the Concord. "Bring us out of hyperspace," Tahoe ordered. "Standard formation. Heat weapon systems powered down but ready." The black of space rippled and tore as the horizon emerged first, followed by the rest of the human fleet in perfect synchronization. Before them floated the Concord Diplomatic Station, a gleaming ring-shaped structure with curved spires that reminded Tahoe of ancient cathedrals. Ambassador Rock stood in the observation dome, his 4 translucent arms trembling slightly as the first human ship appeared. The Vesperi diplomat had expected perhaps 2 or 3 modest vessels. What emerged instead sent waves of anxiety through his nervous system. First came a massive ship with sleek, predatory lines, at least twice the size indicated in the briefings. Then another, and another. They kept coming, each one displaying the same confident precision, arranging themselves in a perfect defensive sphere around their flagship. "Honored Ambassador," his aide Juan whispered, her delicate antennae twitching with alarm. "Sensors are detecting 37 vessels. Their energy signatures exceed anything in our database." Rock's compound eyes widened, the hundreds of facets reflecting the incoming fleet. "This cannot be right," he hissed quietly. The intelligence reports described humans as barely space-capable, with perhaps a dozen primitive vessels to their name. "The reports were clearly wrong," Juan replied, displaying a holographic readout. "Their ships show evidence of advanced gravitational manipulation, energy shielding beyond our capabilities, and power readings that suggest significant weapon systems." Another aide, a tall Vesperi named Minho, approached with a communication pad. "They're requesting docking permission for their diplomatic shuttle and a security escort of 6 vessels to maintain position near the station." Rock's outer skin paled from its normal blue to a sickly white. 6 escort vessels was unprecedented. Most species brought 1, perhaps 2 ships for protection during first contact protocols. "Do we deny the request?" Minho asked. Rock considered his options. Refusing the humans now could be interpreted as hostility. "No," he finally decided. "Grant permission, but increase station security protocols to level 3. Alert the Concord Council immediately." Minho departed to relay the orders while Juan continued analyzing the sensor data. "Ambassador, there's something else. The human vessels show evidence of recent repairs, consistent with combat damage." "Combat? Against whom?" Rock asked, his voice barely audible. "Unknown. But these aren't vessels designed purely for exploration or diplomacy," Juan replied. "These are warships, Ambassador." A cold sensation spread through Rock's thorax as he watched the human shuttle detach from their flagship. The shuttle itself was larger than many species' main vessels, its dark hull reflecting the stars as it approached the docking bay. "The Council assured me this would be a simple formality," Rock muttered. "Welcoming a primitive species, guiding them into the galactic community as junior members. Perhaps we should adjust our expectations," Juwan suggested, her tone respectful but firm. Rock activated the station's database, pulling up what little information existed about Earth. Most of it came from long-range observations and a few brief, unofficial encounters with trading vessels from other species. "Their planet is classified as a death world," he read aloud. "High gravity, extreme weather patterns, diverse predator species. How did intelligent life even evolve there?" Through adaptation, Juan replied simply. And survival requires strength. Rock closed the file and straightened his ceremonial robes. Prepare the diplomatic chambers for their arrival. Add additional security, but keep them discreet. I don't want to appear threatened. And the welcoming speech? Juan asked. I'll adjust it accordingly. As Juan left to make preparations, Rock remained at the viewport, studying the imposing human fleet. Their ships hung in space like predators waiting to strike, their formation both beautiful and terrifying in its precision. The communication system chimed, and a human voice filled the chamber, deep, confident, and somehow unsettling. Diplomatic Station Harmony, this is Admiral Tahoe of the United Earth Nations. We are honored by your welcome and look forward to establishing peaceful relations with the Galactic Concord. Rock pressed the response button. Admiral Tahoe, this is Ambassador Rock. We welcome you to Concord Space. Your substantial escort was unexpected. There was a brief pause before the human replied. We believe proper preparation prevents poor performance, Ambassador. My government felt it appropriate to put our best foot forward for such a historic occasion. Of course, Rock responded, not understanding the idiom but recognizing the diplomatic evasion. We await your arrival at Docking Bay 3. As the communication ended, Rock felt a terrible certainty growing within him. The Concord's intelligence division had catastrophically underestimated these humans. They weren't coming as supplicants seeking membership or protection. They were arriving as equals, or perhaps something more concerning. Rock took a final look at the human fleet, their ships now illuminated against the darkness of space. Everything about them, from their design to their formation, spoke of a species that had evolved through conflict and emerged stronger for it. Prepare the diplomatic chambers, he instructed a passing station officer, struggling to keep his voice steady, and update our security protocols to level 4. As the station's alert status quietly escalated, Rock felt a cold certainty. These humans were not what they seemed, and today's meeting would not go as the Concorde had planned. The grand chamber of the diplomatic station gleamed with polished surfaces and soft, ambient lighting designed to accommodate the visual sensitivities of dozens of species. Representatives from 13 Concorde member worlds stood in a semicircle, their varied physiologies presenting a living display of galactic diversity. Ambassador Rock took his position at the center of the welcome committee, his translucent blue skin now carefully regulated to display confidence rather than the anxiety churning within. The chamber doors parted silently, and the human delegation entered. The Concorde welcomes Earth and her colonies, Rock announced formally, his translator converting his high-pitched Vesperi speech into standard galactic common. Admiral Tahoe led the human group, dressed in a deep blue uniform adorned with silver insignia. He was taller than expected, standing nearly 2 meters, with broad shoulders and a straight posture that conveyed natural authority. When he smiled in response to the greeting, Rock suddenly noticed his teeth, white, strong, and unmistakably those of an evolved predator species. We're honored to be welcomed among the stars, Tahoe replied, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. The humans spread out slightly as they entered, a movement so subtle and coordinated that most delegates missed its tactical nature. Rock didn't. He noticed how they positioned themselves to maintain clear sightlines to all entrances. Among the delegation was Commander Hyjin, a compact woman with alert eyes that systematically scanned the room, cataloging every detail. She stood slightly behind Tahoe's right shoulder, her hands clasped behind her back in what appeared to be a relaxed pose, but allowed quick access to something secured at her waist. The formal introductions proceeded smoothly until a server drone malfunctioned. It wobbled mid-air, the tray of welcome refreshments tilting dangerously before gravity took hold. Before anyone could react, Hyjin moved with shocking speed. She crossed 2 meters of space in an eye blink, her hand shooting out to catch the tray before it reached the floor. Not a single drink spilled. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Remarkable reflexes, noted Counselor Dury of the Malosian delegation, his feathered crest rising in surprise. Hyjin straightened, passing the tray to an attendant as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Just basic training," she replied casually. "On Earth, we deal with 1.3 g gravity. Makes us a bit quick in standard conditions." Rock exchanged glances with Dury. The standard gravity of most Concord homeworlds ranged from 0.8 to 1.0 g. Earth's gravity level would crush many species. The meeting progressed to the ceremonial sharing of homeworld images. When it was the humans' turn, they displayed scenes of Earth, vast oceans, towering mountains, sprawling cities. But it was the casual mention of their colonies that truly disturbed the Concord representatives. "Our settlement on Proxima Centauri b has grown to 2 million residents," Tahoe mentioned, as images showed humans working in environments that should have been fatal. "The sulfuric atmosphere is challenging but manageable with minimal protection." Later, as delegates mingled during a reception, Rock pulled his aide Jiwan aside. "I need more information on these humans," he whispered. "Their physical capabilities, their technology, everything. There's something wrong with our intelligence." Jiwan nodded discreetly. "I've already begun compiling new data, Ambassador. Initial findings are concerning." The reception continued with practiced diplomatic smiles, but Rock noticed how the Concord species unconsciously created space around the humans. Even the Drakari, twice the human size with their armor-like exoskeletons, seemed wary. When formal negotiations began the next morning, the humans presented their credentials and history in carefully measured terms. They spoke of peaceful intentions and mutual cooperation, yet something in their manner suggested a calculated restraint. Earth unified politically only after several global conflicts, Tahoe explained to the Council. "We value peace precisely because we understand war." That evening, Rock reviewed the preliminary reports Jiwan had gathered. The data made his appendages tremble. Humans had progressed from primitive atmospheric flight to faster-than-light travel in less than 2 centuries, a technological leap that had taken most species a millennium. Their written history documented thousands of wars, with weapons of increasing destructive capability. Most disturbingly, they had survived multiple near-extinction events of their own making. "They are adaptable beyond reason," Jiwan explained quietly in Rock's private chamber. "Their physical endurance exceeds every Concord species. They can survive radiation levels that would kill a Vesperi instantly. They can heal from injuries that would be fatal to most. And their reproductive rate." "What about their reproductive rate?" Rock asked, dreading the answer. "They can double their population in less than 40 years, Jiwan replied. "The average Concord species requires a century for such growth." Rock sank into his resting pool, his color shifting to a troubled gray. "And their ships, what have you learned?" "Their technology appears to be a hybrid of several approaches, suggesting they've innovated rather than following standard development paths. Power generation exceeds their stated capabilities by at least 300%. Their weapon systems remain partially shielded from our scans, but energy signatures suggest directed plasma technology we've only theorized." That night, after ensuring the secure connection, Rock composed an urgent message to the Concord High Council. His appendages hovered over the transmission pad as he carefully considered his words. Finally, he wrote, "The humans are not what we believed. They are stronger, faster, more resilient, and more advanced than our intelligence suggested. They evolved on a high-gravity death world, survived multiple self-inflicted extinction events, and advanced technologically at an unprecedented rate. They present themselves as peaceful, but everything about them, from their physiology to their history to their fleet composition, speaks of a species forged in conflict. I recommend immediate reassessment of our approach. These are not junior partners to be guided, but a potential power to be treated with utmost caution." He sent the encrypted message, then turned to the viewport where Earth's fleet hung in the darkness. From this distance, their ships looked almost beautiful, their lights twinkling like stars against the void. What troubled Rock most wasn't what the humans had revealed, but what they might still be hiding. The third day of negotiations began with tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud. The circular table in the main diplomatic chamber seemed to divide into two sides despite its design intended to promote equality. On one side sat the Concord representatives, led by Ambassador Rock. On the other, the humans under Admiral Taiho's leadership. Rock's skin had taken on a pale blue hue, indicating stress among his kind. He shuffled the data tablets before him and looked directly at Taiho. "Your fleet exceeds the diplomatic protocols we established," Rock stated, his voice firm despite his anxiety. "The Concord requests a reduction in your military presence. 28 warships is not a diplomatic gesture. It is a show of force." The other Concord representatives nodded in agreement. Councillor Dury of the Melosians fluffed his feathered neck in agitation. Admiral Taiho remained calm, his face revealing nothing. He exchanged a brief glance with Commander Hyjin before responding. "With respect, Ambassador," Taiho said, his voice measured and controlled, "we came prepared for any contingency. Our fleet follows standard Earth protocols for first contact scenarios." "Standard protocols?" Dury interrupted, unable to contain himself. His translator struggled to convey his tone, but the indignation came through clearly. "You came armed for war." The chamber fell silent. Taiho's expression hardened slightly, though his voice remained diplomatic. "We came armed because we're not naive," he replied evenly. "Our history taught us that new species are often tested or exploited. We prefer peaceful relations, but we won't be vulnerable." Hyjin leaned forward. "Perhaps it would help the Concord to understand Earth's position. When our first colony ships reached Alpha Centauri, they were unarmed. 3 ships were lost before we understood the threat." "What threat?" asked Rock. "Pirates. Resource hunters. Those who see new species as easy targets," Hyjin said. "We learned our lesson in blood." The meeting continued with formal discussions about trade agreements and cultural exchange programs, but the underlying tension remained. The Concord representatives whispered among themselves during breaks, casting nervous glances toward the humans. Later that afternoon, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor. "Atmospheric breach in East Wing, Sector 7, announced the station's computer. All personnel evacuate immediately. Pressure dropping to critical levels." Rock and several other ambassadors were in the nearby lounge when the alarm sounded. Reports quickly came in that 3 Melosian delegates and a Vesperi cultural attaché were trapped in the affected sector, behind doors that had automatically sealed. "Emergency teams are 8 minutes out," reported Juan, checking her communicator. Suddenly, the humans in the lounge were moving. Taiho barked orders, while Hyjin and 2 other officers sprinted toward the breach zone. "You can't go in there," Rock called after them. "The atmosphere is already below survivable levels." Taiho ignored him, following his team at a quick pace. Rock hesitated only briefly before hurrying after them, accompanied by 2 security officers. They watched through a sealed viewport as the humans overrode the safety protocols and entered the decompressing section. What Rock witnessed next would haunt him for cycles to come. The humans moved through the rapidly decompressing corridor without environmental suits. Their skin reddened and eyes bulged slightly from the pressure difference, but they continued functioning where any Concord species would have already collapsed. Hyjin reached the trapped delegates first. The Melosians were unconscious, their feathered bodies huddled together as they suffocated. The Vesperi attaché was barely conscious, his color faded to near transparency. The humans worked quickly, applying emergency breather units to the aliens. One human officer, a stocky man named Jono, physically tore apart a jammed pressure door using some kind of temporary strength enhancement. Hyjin carried 2 Melosians at once, their weight seemingly inconsequential to her despite the Concord gravity settings. Most shocking of all, when one section lost pressure completely, exposing them briefly to near vacuum conditions, the humans simply held their breath and continued working. They sealed ruptures with emergency patches applied directly with their hands, operating in conditions that should have killed them instantly. Within minutes, they had rescued all 4 trapped delegates and stabilized the breach. In the medical bay afterward, Rock approached the station's chief medical officer, a Cerulean named Minju with 6 eyes and specialized scanning appendages. "How did they survive that?" Rock asked, watching through a window as Hyjin declined medical treatment despite blood vessels having burst in her eyes from the pressure change. Minju's appendages twitched in scientific fascination. "They can endure vacuum exposure for nearly 2 minutes," came the astonished reply. "Their circulatory system has remarkable pressure regulation capabilities, and their bone density." The doctor paused, checking readings again. "It's like they evolved on a death world. Their skeletal structure could withstand crushing pressures that would collapse our bodies." "A death world," Rock repeated softly. "Earth." That evening, the Concord High Council sent direct orders. The humans must reduce their fleet presence immediately. It was non-negotiable. Rock delivered the demand personally to Admiral Teo in his temporary quarters. "This comes directly from the highest levels of Concord leadership," Rock explained. "While we appreciate your assistance today, your military presence is causing significant concern." Tahoe listened politely, then shook his head. "I understand the Concord's position, Ambassador. However, our fleet will remain at its current strength. This is not negotiable from our side either." "You refuse a direct request from the Concord." Rock's color darkened with alarm. "We refuse to place our delegation in a vulnerable position," Tahoe corrected gently. "Perhaps in time, when trust is established, we can reconsider." After Tahoe's polite but firm refusal, Rock returned to his quarters, his mind racing. The humans had saved Concord lives today, working in conditions that should have killed them. Yet their refusal to reduce their military presence suggested either deep paranoia or hidden knowledge. Rock found himself caught between duty to the Concord and growing apprehension about pushing the humans too far. Their physical capabilities were far beyond anything in Concord records. Their technology was more advanced than they had disclosed, and now they had demonstrated a willingness to defy Concord authority. As he prepared his report for the High Council, Rock wondered what would happen if the Concord decided to force the issue. The thought made his appendages tremble. The 4th day of negotiations never began. At 7:30 station time, as delegates prepared for morning sessions, the proximity alarms screamed to life. Through the station's viewports, reality itself seemed to tear open as 5 massive vessels emerged from hyperspace, much closer than safety protocols allowed. Rock recognized their configuration immediately. "Krell," he whispered, his color draining to pale gray. The Krell Dominion was not part of the Concord. They were raiders and slavers who operated on the fringes of civilized space. Their biology, part organic, part cybernetic, made them formidable warriors, while their society valued strength above all else. Before anyone could react, the Krell opened fire. The station shuddered as energy blasts struck its outer rings. The shields held initially, but warning lights flashed across all control panels. "We are under attack," announced the station's computer as emergency protocols activated. "All personnel report to designated safety areas." In the central diplomatic chamber, representatives from 13 species gathered in confusion and fear. The room had been designed as a showcase, with panoramic viewports offering stunning views of space. Now those same windows revealed destruction as the Krell continued their assault. "We are diplomats, not warriors," Counselor Dury cried, his feathers flattened in terror as the station shook again. A support beam crashed down nearby, narrowly missing the Melosian delegation. Ambassador Rock attempted to organize an evacuation, but reports quickly came in that the main escape pod bays had been specifically targeted. The Concord security forces, primarily ceremonial in nature, were overwhelmed within minutes. "Shield integrity at 40%, reported the computer. "Life support systems compromised in outer sections." Through a viewport, Rock could see the Concord defense vessels, just 6 small ships, moving to intercept. They were swept aside by Krell weapons with frightening ease. They knew exactly when to strike, Juan said, helping an injured delegate to a chair, when the station would be full of high-value targets. The lights flickered and dimmed as power systems diverted energy to maintain the failing shields. In the darkness, the delegates huddled together, ancient rivalries forgotten in the face of their common doom. Then, through the viewport, Rock saw something change. The human fleet, which had maintained a respectful distance from the station, was moving. What happened next defied everything Rock understood about space combat. The Earth vessels accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible at such close range. They didn't form a traditional defense pattern, but instead executed a complex, three-dimensional maneuver that seemed to anticipate the Krell's every move. "Look," whispered Dury, pointing with a trembling feathered hand. The human ships were firing now, their weapons cutting through Krell shields with surgical precision. Their smaller vessels darted between the larger Krell ships, drawing fire while larger human warships targeted key systems. It was like watching predators take down much larger prey through coordinated pack tactics. Inside the station, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The central life support system failed, switching to emergency backups. Several sections reported hull breaches, and the Krell had launched boarding craft. "They're coming for us," Juan said quietly. "The Krell take important prisoners as trophies or for ransom." As if confirming her words, the distant sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors outside the diplomatic chamber. The few remaining Concord security officers positioned themselves at the doors, their expressions grim. The nearest door exploded inward, killing 2 guards instantly. Rock braced himself for the sight of Krell boarders, but instead, armored human figures poured through the smoke. Admiral Tahoe had stayed on his ship to coordinate the space battle, but Commander Hyjin led the rescue team. Her combat armor was unlike the ceremonial uniforms they'd seen before, black, sleek, and clearly designed for actual warfare. A helmet concealed most of her face, but her eyes were visible through the visor, calm and focused amid the chaos. "We're securing the diplomatic personnel," she announced, her voice amplified through her suit's speakers. "Everyone stay calm and follow instructions." More humans entered, establishing a perimeter with practiced efficiency. Their weapons were unlike the ceremonial arms carried by Concord security. These were clearly deadly tools designed for one purpose. "The main evacuation routes are compromised," Hyjin informed them, consulting a holographic display projected from her wrist. "We've secured an alternative path to our shuttles." As if to punctuate her statement, the station shook violently again. Support beams groaned, and cracks appeared in the ceiling. "We need to move now," Hyjin ordered. "Stay together." The journey through the damaged station was a nightmare. They moved through darkened corridors, lit only by emergency lighting and the occasional explosion. The air grew thin as life support continued to fail. Several times they encountered Krell boarding parties, and each time the humans engaged without hesitation. Rock watched in astonishment as the humans fought. They moved with impossible speed and coordination, communicating through subtle hand signals and helmet displays. When hit by Krell weapons, they continued fighting despite injuries that would have killed Concord species instantly. Most surprising was how carefully they protected the diplomats. The humans repeatedly placed themselves between the delegates and danger, forming living shields when necessary. Halfway to the evacuation point, they were ambushed in a wide corridor. Krell soldiers appeared at both ends, cutting off escape. Their leader, a towering figure with extensive cybernetic enhancements, stepped forward. "Surrender the diplomats," it demanded in harsh, translated common. "Resistance means death." Without hesitation, Hyjin stepped forward, positioning herself between the Krell and the cowering delegates. "That's not happening," she replied simply. The Krell opened fire. Hyjin and her team responded instantly, their weapons unleashing controlled bursts that dropped several attackers. But they were outnumbered. Rock watched in horror as energy blasts struck Hyjin repeatedly. Her armor absorbed some impacts, but others penetrated, leaving scorched holes. Still, she continued fighting, her movements slowing, but her aim remaining deadly accurate. When the last Krell fell, Hyjin staggered but remained standing. Dark red blood, so different from the blue ichor of most Concord species, seeped from multiple wounds. "Commander, you're injured," Rock said, approaching hesitantly. Hyjin applied a medical seal to her most serious wound, the device hissing as it bonded with her armor and flesh. "I'll live," she said simply. "We need to keep moving." As they continued toward the evacuation point, Rock found himself walking beside her. "Why risk yourself for us?" he asked quietly. "After how we treated you, questioned your presence, your fleet." Hyjin looked at him, her eyes visible through her damaged helmet visor. There was no resentment in her gaze, only a steady determination. "Because that's what humans do," she answered. "We protect those who need protection. It's who we are." Through the nearest viewport, Rock could see the space battle was turning. The human fleet had surrounded the Krell vessels, their coordinated fire systematically disabling the larger ships without destroying them. For the first time since the attack began, Rock felt something beyond fear, something that felt strangely like hope. The rescue shuttles docked with the UEN horizon as the last Krell vessels retreated into hyperspace. Medical teams rushed to treat the injured diplomats while damage reports flowed in from across the station. 17 dead, over 100 wounded, but without the human intervention, the casualties would have been total. 3 days after the attack, once emergency repairs restored basic station functions, Ambassador Rock requested a private meeting with Admiral Tahoe. They met in a small conference room aboard the Horizon, away from the political maneuvering that had already begun among the Concord representatives. Rock's translucent skin had returned to its normal blue hue, but darker patches revealed lingering stress. His forearms moved in careful gestures as he spoke. "You saved us all," he began, then paused, his compound eyes fixed on Tahoe. "But you also deceived us about your capabilities." Admiral Tahoe sat across from him, his uniform immaculate despite the recent battle. He showed no sign of offense at the accusation. "We didn't deceive you," Tahoe replied calmly. "We just didn't volunteer everything. There's a difference. Your fleet, your technology, your physical abilities, they're far more advanced than you claimed in your initial contact." "Yes." Tahoe made no attempt to deny it. "Why hide your true strength?" Rock asked. "The Concord values honesty in its dealings." Tahoe's expression remained composed, but his eyes showed a hint of something harder. "We studied the Concord's history before making contact," he explained. "We noticed a pattern. New species are often relegated to subordinate roles, especially if they appear weak." Rock wanted to deny this but couldn't. The Concord's diplomatic archives contained too many examples of exactly what Tahoe described. "So you came with overwhelming force," Rock said quietly. "We came prepared for war precisely because we hope for peace," Tahoe said. "Humans learned long ago that strength respected is better than weakness exploited." Rock's outer skin rippled as he considered this philosophy. It ran counter to the Concord's stated ideals of cooperation and mutual support, yet the evidence of its effectiveness was undeniable. "The Krell would have enslaved us all without your intervention," Rock admitted. "That's why we brought our fleet," Tahoe nodded. "Not as a threat to you, but as a shield." He leaned forward slightly. "We knew about the Krell before we arrived. Our scout ships encountered them 2 years ago. You knew they would attack." Rock's color darkened with shock. "We suspected they might test us, or you. The timing was unexpected, but not the attempt itself." Tahoe's voice remained level. "We've dealt with predators before, Ambassador, both on Earth and among the stars." Later, Rock visited Commander Hyjin in the medical bay. Despite the human's remarkable healing abilities, she was still recovering from wounds that would have killed any Concord species. "Your people are discussing us right now, aren't they?" Hyjin asked as he approached her bed. debating whether we're too dangerous to allow into the Concord. Rock didn't bother denying it. Some fear what we've seen of your capabilities. Hyjin smiled slightly. They haven't seen all of our capabilities, not even close. The statement should have frightened him. Instead, Rock found it strangely reassuring. Why did you place yourself between the ambassadors and the Krell? He asked. After we questioned your presence, your motives, after we demanded you reduce your fleet. Because protection isn't conditional, Hyjin replied simply. We don't just protect those who agree with us or like us. We protect because it's right. That evening, in his temporary quarters aboard the human flagship, Rock began drafting a new report to Concord leadership. The words came slowly at first, then with increasing conviction. He wrote of humanity's paradoxical nature, their capacity for terrible violence existing alongside their willingness to die protecting others. He described how they had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them daily, developing resilience and adaptability beyond anything the Concord had encountered. Most importantly, he detailed how they had used their strength not for conquest or domination, but for preservation. The humans concealed their true capabilities because our history gave them reason to be cautious, he wrote. They came prepared for war precisely because they value peace above all else. They understand, better than we have, that true peace is not the absence of strength, but the wise application of it. His final recommendation was simple. Humans should be approached with respect rather than condescension. Their fierce exterior hides something extraordinary, a species that fights hardest not for conquest, but for protection. Perhaps we have something to learn from them after all. 2 weeks later, as the diplomatic conference finally reconvened in the repaired central chamber, Rock watched Admiral Tahoe and Commander Hyjin entering with their delegation. Hyjin walked with a slight limp, the only visible reminder of injuries that should have been fatal. This time, the other Concord representatives didn't draw back. Instead, many stepped forward to offer personal thanks. The Malosian delegates, whose lives Hyjin had personally saved, presented her with ceremonial feathers, their highest honor for non-Malosians. Councillor Dury approached Tahoe with formal dignity. The Concord acknowledges Earth's application for membership, he announced loudly enough for all to hear, but perhaps not as a junior partner, as we initially assumed. We come as equals, Tahoe replied. No more, no less. Rock observed the humans carefully. Their posture remained alert, their eyes still scanned entrances and exits, and their fleet still maintained its protective formation outside. They remained warriors, but warriors who chose to be protectors. For the first time since meeting them, Rock did not feel fear at their presence, but something else entirely, hope, not just for the future of the Concord, but for what they might become together. As the formal negotiations resumed, Rock noticed something else that had changed. The Concord representatives were listening now, truly listening, to what the humans had to say. Sometimes, Rock reflected, it took encountering a predator to recognize a protector. And sometimes the fiercest protectors were those who understood precisely what it meant to be a predator, yet chose a different path.